Some people call me an idiot because my son was born in October and I quit my job 2 months after.
Today, I'm excited to be here with Wyatt. He's the owner and founder at San Diego Short-Term Rentals.
We just surpassed 16 properties under contract, and we have quite a few more that are coming on soon. And so this is all within the past 9 months.
What do you think gives you an edge in your business?
There's not a single time, there hasn't been one since we started the business, where a guest departs that we don't have an inspector go to the property and inspect the property.
What did it take for you to start being a little bit more, just paying a little bit more attention to those early red flags?
I start to see the red flags in other owners, kind of the same traits. Some people, they have no problem working with those types of people, but for us, we try to be as efficient as possible. I could be doing this the completely wrong way. This is the first business I've ever started, Sebastian.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality, and where we aim to bring together entrepreneurs, leaders, investors, founders, and operators in this vacation rental and hospitality space so they can tell us about their stories, the lessons that they have learned along the way, and maybe even some of the mistakes they might have made so we don't have to make those same mistakes ourselves. Today, I'm excited to be here with Wyatt. He's the owner and founder at San Diego Short-Term Rentals. So I guess, Wyatt, thank you for being here. Where are you taking the call from? I guess San Diego.
Yeah. Hey, Sebastian. First off, thank you for having me on today. It's definitely an honor, and so I appreciate that. And I'm taking the call from our home office here in Carlsbad, California. So for those that are not familiar with where Carlsbad's at, it's kind of the North County of San Diego. So that's mainly what we're at as well.
Perfect. So Wyatt, if you were to give some advice based on what you've learned in the process of starting this company, getting it off the ground, if you were to give some advice to someone that's looking into getting into this space, into this vacation rental space, what's something that you either wish you perhaps had known earlier, or you wish you had maybe done slightly differently? What's something that you would give as advice to someone that is getting started in this space?
I don't think there could be a better first question to kick this off. And a couple things, actually, Sebastian. The first one, I think, looking back at it, is getting a fantastic bookkeeper to start with. In the vacation rental space, I'm sure you can imagine, but there's so many moving parts, different line items, crediting guests back. And so getting the right people on board to really, dial in your financial reporting, I feel like is one of the main things that I wish I would have done a little differently. Another one is, within San Diego, it's a very large city, and, moving around the city to get to our inspections can be a little challenging in certain hours of the day. And so I think for me personally, if I would have done it over again, I would have focused on a kind of a smaller area. And we did start off in a pretty small area, like a 10-mile radius. But we got opportunities early on to manage some really nice properties that, geographically were a bit of a drive. And logistically and operationally, it's been a bit of a challenge. But as we've grown, we've really grown into that, and we've added homes in those areas. But I think those are really the two things. The two main things that I think would be very important to focus on is, getting the right people on board to manage your financial reporting, and that's the operator's a rock star, accountant. And then also, operating out of a very tight area to start with, and then just kind of expanding from there.
Yeah, that's great. Those are great points. Thanks for sharing. Let's talk a little bit about your story in terms of how you got started in this space. So tell us a little bit about how you even got involved in this industry. Out of all the things you could be doing, how do you end up in short-term rentals?
So it's similar to, a lot of people. I listened to a few of the other podcasts, but kind of got into it by accident. And so prior to managing vacation rentals, I was in sales, a few different industries, but for the majority of my career in medical sales. And I got to work with some very fantastic people. But I think, what really pushed me away at the end of the day is, in corporate America, especially in sales, you're growing this business However, each year in publicly traded companies, their main goal is, increase shareholder profitability. And so what that kind of equates to, down the line to sales is, I keep on building this business, but my goal, like the rim, just keeps on getting lifted. And I really wanted to set out to do and build a business that basically, as the business grew, not only did our reputation grow, but our income grow, and everything grows. And there's really no corrections that we take. And so that's kind of how it started. And actually, looking back to our first couple properties, um, a relative purchased a property, in San Diego, and they were searching for management companies, and they didn't really find a solution that they liked, and so they reached out to myself and asked if I'd be willing to manage the property for them. And it was great. It's a great way to start. I mean, you learn to fail with people that and you really, you make the mistakes early on and in a small scale, which I feel like is huge. Uh, and so from there, we started doing really well. We received a couple of referrals, and then once we hit 2 properties, I figured it was time to really build out, not only operations but also an organization. So we filed, to create an LLC and all that good stuff. And we've just continued to add on it. It's not like we did everything at first, every single thing that we have in place now. With time, it kind of came on. And so 3 months ago, I actually quit my job. We were in a position to do that, and we just surpassed 16 properties under contract, and we have quite a few more that are coming on soon. And so that this is all within the past 9 months. So
Wow.
it's yeah, and it's we did it as lean as possible. We have a couple employees now part time, but yeah, I mean I feel like everyone's journey into vacation rental space is unique, and that's really how we did it.
Love it, man. So tell me, what's been the way in which you've approached, managing to grow the business while still figuring out how to structure the business almost at the same time, right? Because it's almost like you are, you are basically building the plane while flying it to, when you're getting started.
Great
Um,
analogy.
yeah, what's been your approach to balancing those two things there? Growing while also figuring out how to deliver.
Yeah, no, I mean it hasn't been easy. We've worked through the weekends, obviously in the vacation rental space, and then also, I've got some really good mentors helping me out, and so I think that's really the most important thing is finding someone that is willing to mentor you and has that experience, because that saved us, not only time but a lot of money. And starting a business is very expensive, doing it the right way, and having mentors to really help us. And then, part of it's too is failing, learning from your mistakes, and trying not to make those same mistakes again. And so that's really how we did it. I wish I could say there's a secret sauce, but I think really just, doing the research, figuring it out, and really learning from people that have done it before is really, kind of how we did it.
Yeah, but let me try to understand, which is something which is like, when you are new in an industry, in a business, whatever that might be, many other people could have gotten stuck with trying to figure out, all the details of everything, which if you do that, like, you never grow, right? So you want to have a balance, like, you need clients, so you have something to deliver, but you also need to know how to deliver it, right? So in
Right.
in your case, what's been, do you give priority to one versus the other? Has your approach been, let's get the client first, then we'll figure it out, and once we figure it out, you know we are figuring it out, thinking, okay, how do we figure this out for not just this client but the next couple of clients, and that's what's allowed you to kind of go, like right now, how do you look at that, again, scaling versus building?
Yeah. Yeah. So for us, and I'm glad you asked that question because the first 6 months was really just building out everything that we can. I was lucky enough to be in a position where I still had a day job. Of course, my wife was working as well. And so we had, the funds to really invest in the infrastructure and the systems and the operations. But really, once we really got, our property management software, the bookkeeper in place, and those things in place, it was just a sales push. And lucky for me, I spent the past 7 years in sales. And what I learned is, we're not really like this is everything that we have. We really sold on differentiators and features and benefits that we can dive into later. And that was really our focus. And so I guess to really answer your question is sales and owner acquisition was really our focus. Um,
Mhm.
and that was really our goal. And once that really became our sole focus, we saw the success. And because I mean, starting a business, there's so many things that you can focus on, and really just spin your wheels. And I was just looking at revenue forecasts. We were projecting out, and if we can just hit, these certain numbers, everything else will fall into place. And with that, like we were working our tails off to provide a good service. It's one thing getting the clients, but another thing is keeping them, because it's cost so much money to get a new client unless it's a referral.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I guess to really land the plane is our focus was really just, building out operations, and then really just push as hard as we could on the owner acquisition side of things.
Yeah. Okay. Which makes sense. Now, on the owner acquisition side of things,
Mhm.
um, because you've been working in sales for so long, you have an edge for sure when it comes to that side of things. You mentioned scraping. You mentioned when we were talking before that you were somewhat efficient and sophisticated in your approach to maybe getting those leads. What's worked for you in terms of finding those homeowners?
Yeah. So it's not just one thing, and I'll dive into everything right now. But and this is a part of the business that's evolved as well, because when we first started, I was on Zillow, and I was basically looking at every single home for rent. I was looking at homes that I thought in the long-term space, were a little undervalued. Basically, what I mean by
Mm,
that is with our forecast, I feel we could, achieve a greater amount return to our property owners and what they would get in the long-term space. And then they would also have the flexibility to use the property for personal use and family. And so that was how I started. I would go on to Zillow. I would look at every single property, and the ones that I thought, we could beat their revenue projections that were, listed for rent by owner, I would call them. And I just,
mm,
in the evenings, I would just call and make, 10, 20 calls. And then, from there, there's only so many homes on Zillow. And so we've came across, different softwares out there that have access to county records. And so I guess to name one, OwnerPoint is one that we use, and it's great. I mean, you could look up any property out there, and access to county records, and, purchase the owner's contact information. And from there, we would basically put together a strategy, um, and call these people. And that's really how it evolved, is reaching out through owners, through these different platforms. And right now, kind of what it's evolved into and what it looks like now is we have a team that dials all day long out to our owners, and then sets appointments with myself to basically, quote unquote, I guess you can call me a closer. And so that's really how we've built it out. um, and we have a constant funnel. And so I have about 5 to 6 conversations, fruitful conversations, with potential property owners a week. And we convert about 10 to 20% of those. A lot of it really comes down to, in our market, getting the permit. And so if permits were not in, I guess, not in play, I feel like we could be growing a lot faster. But I am grateful for the rate that we are growing, because I think, you know, with explosive growth comes problems. And so we've had some challenges. And so I do think everything's working out for a reason, and we're growing at the pace that works for us as an organization.
hmm that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about that approach you've decided to take there with having setters or SDRs cold call these people, and then you take it from there. um you know Given your sales background, is this something you decided to build in house, or is there still an element of outsourcing here? Walk us through that process. So owner point to get the data, and then from there, in terms of once you have the data, what's working for you in terms of actually setting those calls. Is it a professional setter? Did you hire someone? And what's the offer at that stage for them to accept to hop on a call with you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sebastian. And so you're absolutely right. We have a setter overseas that basically, dials a few hundred, potential clients a day. And from there, it's very simple. We just gauge interest. We don't try to shove a square peg through a round hole. And we really just gauge interest. If it's something they're interested in, very basic conversation. And then any questions they have, the setter just deflects them to basically a conversation with myself. And then once, they're warm and they come to myself, I really just try to understand their needs, and what they're looking for. I don't go directly to, speaking of our features and benefits and what makes us different in the space. It's more of understanding the owner and, really their expectations and their goals with their property, and then seeing if we can find a way to work together and achieve those goals. And I think the value to that is, not only do we set expectations, up front, but we're also finding the people that are going to be the best fit for us. You know, we the way that we operate, it's a very expensive model, from a business perspective, and so we really have a certain property that we're looking for and a certain owner to work with. And through this process that we built out, with the appointment setter and then myself as the closer currently right now, we're really finding, the properties that work for our model. And we've been very successful with that. And, with that comes referrals. And now kind of our marketing's evolved, not, we're still doing that, but we've evolved to, reaching out to realtors, and then some developers as well. And so, with that, you know, we're really just trying to, I guess, fill as many funnels as we can into our pipeline, so that, even, if things, you know, go in another direction in the short-term rental industry, we still have, a consistent funnel of new business coming through, which is, like I said, it's been a huge asset for us.
Hmm. And when it comes to getting people, like let's say someone's listening to this and is like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to go ahead and hire someone, a VA overseas or whatever. I'm going to give them access to this massive list of owners to contact. Now, what do I tell the VA to do? Like, how do you how do you train that VA to be effective at setting those calls? Because I'm sure you must have some kind of an offer. I don't know if it's a lead magnet of sorts, or if it's something, right? Or what's the yeah, what's the hook? What's the excuse to give them a call? Again, insisting a lot on this because of your background in sales. I'm sure you don't just give the list to the VA and hope they figure it out. I'm sure you might give them some training, perhaps some guidance. What do you think is needed for a setter to be successful at scheduling calls with you as a management company?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a great question. And so really what we did is we built out, kind of like a template of what they were going to discuss, and, any deflections, that they may have. And so we built that out, and really it's very general. It's, hey, we just want to confirm this is the owner of this property. We hope you're having a wonderful day. And then, we just asked them, like, have you ever considered, renting your property as a vacation rental? It's a very general question. And that usually sparks two answers: yes or no, or maybe. And if it's a yes or a maybe, we just dig deeper and we explore that. Well, how has your process been? Are you happy with your current management? Um, you know, and then from there, we kind of just go through a series of questions. We don't really talk about us as an organization. We really just want to understand if this would be a good fit. And then, if they just say no and they're firm on no, we leave them alone. I mean, we definitely, like I said, don't want to shove a square peg down a round hole. We're just looking for people that want to go down this route and they're interested in it. They want to work with, a fantastic company. And so from there, my agent, vets them. And then once, they're on board, they want to move forward. I have a calendar link that I share with her that she can see my calendar, and she just books them into my calendar. And then we, at some point give them a call at a later date. And then, myself, I really just dive in a deeper dive into their needs, and, just tell me about the property. I mean, like, are you renting it currently? In what capacity? Are you happy with, property care? How's the revenue? I mean, what channels are you guys listing on? Just all these questions that one would ask in our business. And then regarding, kind of training the agent and making sure that, they're doing what's expected and really, getting the most out of these calls because, you know, the answer rate is, south of 20%. And so, it's very important when we do get someone on the phone to really, get their attention and get them excited about something. And so with that, our dialer, we use Mojo. There's so many dials out there, but Mojo just works for us. We have call recordings. So once a week, we'll just get on a quick call and we'll kind of just run through a few scenarios. And I will, we'll kind of, she'll give me her feedback. I'll give her mine and we kind of coach it up and we refine it. I mean, it wasn't great at the start, it's new for her. And, and then also for us, it took a couple to find the right person, it took us a couple of people that we were working with to find, the right person for us. And so I guess what I'm trying to say, Sebastian, is it's just like a refining process of really, finding out what's going to work and trial and error. Some things may work for certain markets, other strategies may work for different markets. It really just depends. But I think, just speaking at a high level, and just being very clear of what you're offering and understanding if it's a benefit to the customer is what's most important. And that's really what I feel like we have done at a high level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. And I like, from what you just said, I really like the mindset of it's a continuous process of refinement. It's not a black or white. It's not like you're gonna try this the first couple of times and it's probably not gonna work, and it's about not concluding that this thing doesn't work. It's more so like, okay, how far did we get and what were we missing, and what do we need to tweak in our approach to get a little bit further down the line. So yeah, trial and error. And also it takes volume, right? If only 20% of the people reply, and then maybe a certain percentage of that decide to schedule a call, like, don't try this 5 times and then be like, okay, cold calling doesn't work. It's like, yeah, you gotta it's a numbers game at the end of the
It's the
day.
numbers game. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. So let's go through a couple of the other things you mentioned there, which is finding also realtors to build those referral partnerships as well. um, yeah, how have you approached that? How have you approached the whole referral game there with realtors?
Yeah, and so this kind of goes back to where we've evolved, like everything has changed so much. And so how it started is, I was just leveraging Zillow and Redfin. And what I would do, this is not the most efficient way, but it's a fairly effective way. So we would look at properties that we feel would be a good fit for us to manage that are on the market currently. I would find the realtor, in the MLS listing, and then I would cross-reference it. I would just copy and paste their name on Google. And, most realtors' contact information is published. It's very accessible. And from
Hmm.
there, I personally would call these realtors and, just introduce myself and, offer to provide, formal rental forecasts to them to present to potential investors or buyers of the home. And so that's worked really well. One thing that we're actually right now recently in the process of shifting into is we've purchased lists of, national databases of realtors and I'm going to give that to my VA and she's going to start calling on these and we're going to develop a script. I mean, this is what's happening right now. And so I don't have a ton of insight on this yet. I don't know if this is going to work well or completely flop. One thing I do know is about 99% or 1% of realtors sell about 80% of the homes. That's just kind of a stat I made up, but I know that's a fairly accurate stat from what I see from the data. And so I know this may not be the best strategy just because there's a lot of very low volume realtors, especially in the market that we're in now. But that's really our plan now. And then also this kind of goes back to my sales background, but you know, realtors, they have, all different types of meetings and events that, they're a part of. And one thing that we've done in the past, not a lot, but, we sponsor these events. So we sponsor bringing some food or whatever it may be and come in and give a brief talk, 5-10 minute talk about kind of what we do. And that's one
Hmm.
way to, just develop relationships, I try not to make it a one-sided, situation. Um, we have a lot of guests that come in from out of state, out of the country that want to invest in San Diego real estate. I mean, it's a great market in my opinion. And so whenever those leads come through, we don't sell real estate. And so we pass those along to people that have referred to us in the past. And so we try to make it as mutually as beneficial as possible. And I think that's valuable because no one wants to be in a relationship where it's, only beneficial on one side. And that's not what we're trying to do. Um, and so that's really, if any leads ever come through, we always pass those through to our realtors. And then we also pay them a great referral fee whenever a home is referred to us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And you mentioned earlier that you've also fine-tuned that you have kind of like a very unique model, and therefore you're looking for a unique owner profile. So
Mhm.
what are you looking for there in terms of when you're trying to select those homeowners? Because especially at first, I've had people on the show that, from anywhere from those that are, I call them happily proudly boutique, to those that have scaled, past 400 properties.
Mhm.
And sometimes those that have scaled, said that, now they're very selective with their homeowners, but that when they were starting, it was a little bit harder. They would say yes to most. uh, but
Mhm.
it seems like you are clear on, being selective, from the get-go. What are you looking for when it comes to, those homeowners, and what exactly is unique about your model there that makes you wanna be so so targeted and focused on who you bring onto the portfolio?
Yeah, and then another great question, Sebastian. And so I think really when I'm going through my questions is I really want to understand their expectations. And so, in our business, it's a lot of just managing personalities. And, if an owner, if they're with a current management and they're basically not happy with a certain revenue target. I understand what they did. And if they just have a very lofty expectation of what they want to do for revenue, or if they're just very demanding and they want to take control and they really want to manage the property themselves, but still have us in place, um, those are the people that we really stay away from. I mean, we manage our properties at a very, very high level, and and we have a very precise system of how we do things. And if an owner, if they want to manage the financials, or if they want to be a part of guest communication, those are really non-negotiables for us, because I mean, as we scale, we're going to have this blueprint for every single property that we bring on, and it's important to us that everything as we grow, we don't have any issues. Like if I have an owner that wants, very special linens or certain products offered in his house, in comparison to everything else that we're offering. I could be wrong on this, but I just think it's going to cause a lot of issues down the road as we continue to scale. And so we're really looking for someone that buys into our program, the white glove service that we offer, and is willing to get behind that. And so that's really what we're looking for is I'm not saying that it's like we're not flexible in certain areas. We are. We definitely want to work with people. But there are certain owners that definitely, try to take advantage of management and step in and, do it exactly how they would want to do it. When, with our experience being the professional isn't always the best,
Mm,
for their property.
totally, totally. And how do you think you got to learning that lesson? Like, what did it take for you to start being a little bit more, um, yeah, just paying it a little bit more attention to those early red flags? Is there anything that happened with a particular owner that you said, okay, yeah, never again?
Kind of. Yeah. Yeah. I've had some owners that, and then also in the onboarding process. I mean, I think for us, what was a little different in our situation is, I was still working in another job early on, and I didn't necessarily need the revenue. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were going to have people that were great to work with, and I don't want to say low maintenance, because if an owner calls, I always take their call. But just people that weren't going to cause problems for our business. And I think that's super important when early on. I mean, if I'm spending, you know, 60% of my time with these issues, that an owner keeps on bringing up, or they're just making our business a lot more inefficient than it needs to be. Um, that's not good business in my opinion. And so I guess we did have some issues with one owner early on. that we work through. We found a kind of a middle ground, but then also, what I've found is, I guess, as during the process of working with them, and before we started working with them, I start to see the red flags in other owners, kind of the same traits. Um, and I guess, for lack of a better term, control freaks. And so, some people, they have no problem working with those types of people, and I applaud that. But for us, I mean, we try to be as efficient as possible. We try to operate very surgical. And so we just have, you know, a certain type of person that we're working with. We have really no ambitions to reach 400 or 500 homes under management. We're named San Diego short-term rentals. You can't really scale that brand outside of San Diego County. And so we want to hit, 100, maybe 150, and do it at a very, very high level. And that's really our focus. That's our goal. And that's what we're trying to do. I mean, I could be doing this the completely wrong way. This is the first business I've ever started, Sebastian. And so, like I said, it's been definitely a learning process. But I guess to answer your question long-windedly, that's really been our kind of focus and
Hmm.
strategy.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And let me tell you that you learned the right lesson, at the right time. Yeah, because a lot of people, I feel like they delay this too much. They wait too long before starting to be selective. So I'm actually, yeah, happy for you that you identify that so early on. Now, when it comes to what you just said right now, which is that this is your first experience, uh you know running a business. I'm curious to know, as a first time business owner, what is the thing that you were not expecting? What's something that has maybe taken you by surprise, in terms of, because we have a certain idea of what being a business owner might feel like, look like. It's, we're all excited. And then, what can you tell us about the reality of being a business owner, especially a first time business owner? Is there anything that perhaps you were not expecting? Better, worse, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, no, this is another great question. And so I think the first thing that comes to mind is, working in corporate America for very large organizations, especially in sales, your day to day and your role is very linear. You're just doing, you know, I guess one task, for lack of a better term. And you're trying to do it at the highest level. And even in sales, like there was a lot of different things I was doing too. It's not like I was just doing one exact thing, but running a business, I mean, there's so many different things, like in the morning, I'm working, trying to dial on the calendar. I'm also, looking at financials. The middle of the day, managing our operations team, also working with the VA overseas. And so there's just so many more moving parts to the business, and running a business than what I would have thought. I have the utmost respect for anyone that started a business, in any industry, because it is by far the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most rewarding thing and the most exciting thing because it's yours. Um, and then also, I guess, financially speaking, there's a lot of fees to run a business in the state of California that I was not expecting. And to hire employees is very expensive. The different insurance we have so much insurance, not only from liability, but workers' comp insurance, just all the fees that come with owning and running a business. Uh, I come from a family that started businesses. I guess they just didn't communicate this to me before starting this, but so I have them to blame for that. But I guess those are really the two things that stand out, is how, I don't want to say volatile, but for lack of a better term, volatile my day is. And then really, financially speaking, just all the red tape and, the stuff you have to deal with owning a business.
So, on a more personal note, how have you managed to personally deal with those challenges that come with having such a volatile day, and the ups and downs, and you're excited at first, and then it's like you hit a wall, and then you find the next cheat code or whatever, or the next approach that ends up working. Like, how have you managed to keep yourself engaged, motivated, excited, to make sure that you keep trying, keep finding new ways? Yeah, what's worked for you on that personal mental headspace game side of things.
Yeah, I guess you could say I'm still working on that. I think one thing that's so unique about the vacation rental industry, and I'm sure running any business is similar, but um, you know, we work every day to do it at a high level. We have guests coming and going every single day, even at 15, 16 properties. I can only imagine what it's like for the people that are managing, hundreds of properties. And so I guess that's something that's still a work in progress for myself personally. But I think, the great thing about it is when it's your business, it doesn't really feel like work. If you're passionate about it, hopefully that he or she is. But yeah, I mean, I'm still working on finding the balance between personal life and work. But the thing is, there's just always something that comes up. And, with that, we're in the future hopefully going to build out escalation processes and operations in place where we have teams that address certain issues that, not every concern or complaint gets bubbled up to myself as the owner. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's an area that I have not perfected. And so if you have any advice, Sebastian, I'd love to hear it. But yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a work in progress for us.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think it's different for everyone, right? I guess one thing's for sure, you are probably in the hardest phase, because there's like at first the portfolio is manageable, for one single person to be overseeing at first, right? So it's like, oh, okay, I can scale this, and then you start scaling it, but there's this phase. I think it's, yeah, probably 10 properties, maybe up to 30, 40, where you're too small to, you know you're too big to do everything yourself, but too small to have someone doing every single little thing. So you're like in this limbo of like still having to do it yourself, but you have too much on your plate. And so I guess what I'm saying here is it's you're not alone. Everyone goes through this phase. It's normal. You'll find the way to it's just a matter of continuing to, I think, scale. And I think you've got that nailed in as far as knowing that that's the most important thing you could be focusing on, which I think is crucial, because some people can get stuck in that phase and not look above and see that, okay, as long as I keep focusing on growing this portfolio, so that I have enough of a critical mass, so that I can afford the right people, so that I can get myself, out of the weeds and out of the day-to-day operation. you know I think that's really what it comes down to. And then everyone has something, for some people is meditation, for some people is walking their dog, for some people is just some kind of sport. I'm sure you've got something too, from back in your corporate America, career. I don't know, like, what is it for you? Like sports? You do any sports? You do any walking around? You do any meditation? Like, because there's got to be something to keep you grounded at the same time, like at the end of the day.
Yeah, I know. And I think I could have described it better myself when you explained, kind of stuck in that phase between 10 to 30 where you can't hire someone to do every little task. And so I can completely relate to that, the situation we're in right now. But regarding kind of what keeps us grounded or me grounded, I enjoy playing golf, but unfortunately, golf takes a significant amount of time to play. And so,
Yeah.
I if I tend to be on my phone more than I am golfing when I do get to play. But yeah, I mean, I have a son now, and so it's great to hang out with him, and he really is like the reset button for me. And so yeah, I mean, everyone has their own thing, and then with time, as we continue to add the, like I said, the right people, uh, internally and externally, it'll all work out. I think one thing about the business too is not really being hyper focused on the issues presently, but really having that long term vision of what things are going to look like down the road. And that's really what I try to do, I guess, to ground myself is I really just try to look at the end goal. And yeah, I mean, I guess everyone has their own way of dealing with it. I mean, I'm sure there's many people dealing with these issues, and everyone's got what works for them.
Yeah. And one little question as well, if you don't mind me staying on this personal note for a second. So congrats on the new kid, by the way. But
Thank you.
what was the timing of that in terms of, like, did you decide to quit your job and double down on the new business when when you knew he was coming, or after he was born, or like what was the timing of that? Because it takes a lot of courage, I think, to decide to make such a drastic shift in your career, in the middle of that going on as well at the same time.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's looking back at it, and then also some of the advice I got. Some people called me an idiot because my son was born in October, end of October, and I quit my job 2 months out. So basically, the business was started in April, and I would had this goal of like I just need to get to like 12 properties by the time he's born, and I didn't because I was working the other job, and there's no excuse really. I just didn't get there, and so I was going through my paternity leave, and we're getting towards the end, and I was just like, am I gonna quit this fantastic job, or am I gonna stay with it? And I ended up quitting, right? Like I didn't know what I was gonna do until the final day, and I quit. And that next month we added 4 properties, um, and everything just kind of seemed to fall into place. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is like I didn't really have the answers. I don't think anyone did, but my wife supported it, and you know, w- I just went to a different level with the work ethic, and we just found a way to just keep on building and building, and it's still adding the right doors. We stuck to kind of what we've been successful with, and things just kind of fell into place after the new year.
What did the self-talk look like, if you don't mind me asking, like when you were at that like crossing point of like having to decide to go with one option or the other? Like was there any kind of like internal battle going on of like the internal doubts versus the internal believer, and kind of like the internal believer ended up winning type of thing, or it was just clear for you that this is what you were going to do? Yeah, what did that internal talk look like?
Yeah, so it was. I don't know. I mean, it was tough, like, cause like, with reason, it's like, stick with the guaranteed job, everything's great there. It's stable. But also, to that point, Sebastian, is this is something I've always wanted to do. And, I really just made my mind up that I'm just going to work as hard as I possibly can to make this successful. And if it doesn't, like, at least I know I tried. And it was very, very scary. You're looking at putting together a budget of all of our personal expenses, and then what private health insurance is going to cost. uh, and it was scary, but I think at the end of the day, it was just like, if I put out my KPIs, if we can make this many calls a day, if I could connect to this many realtors a day, if we can keep our properties at this occupancy, which is completely kind of silly because it's kind of out of my control in some regard, then this will work. And that's what we did. We set these
Hmm.
benchmarks, and we just kept on plugging away until we hit these numbers, and it so far has ended up working out. I mean, it's still early, but it's things have been going. We're still are adding employees now. Like I said, we have two people working for us almost full time with their schedule. um and yeah, I mean, it was just a risk that my wife and I were willing to take.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. And when it comes to, let's change, topic slightly here. You mentioned, when I asked you before, what do you think gives you an edge in your business, and you had mentioned that it's the way you approach inspections, right? So that you really get, as a guest, what you see on the listing. What's unique about that inspection approach you guys follow? And again, how do you manage to keep that under control while still figuring out, the growth side of business, being a dad, you know building all the systems, developing, the team, all that stuff, like specifically around the quality of the properties with that inspection that you say gives you an edge? How do you manage to fit that in, um, so that it doesn't fall through the cracks?
Yeah, that's another great question. That's really where technology and then the hire that we made came in. So like I said in the call, there's not a single time, there hasn't been one since we started the business, where a guest departs that we don't have an inspector go to the property and inspect the property. And the reason why we did this is when I was doing a bunch of digging on our competitors and their reviews and why people left bad reviews, there's a couple, it was either cleanliness or it was, listing transparency. And so what we do is exactly how we stage the property for the listing photos is exactly what the property is going to look like when the guests arrive. And so we utilize Breezeway, which is technology that we use, that not only our cleaners go through a 70 to 80 point checklist, but also our inspector goes through it. And why that's so valuable, Sebastian, is not only that the guests are getting the product that they pay for, that they think they pay for, but when we document, through our inspections, if anything ever goes missing or is damaged or stained, we have that documentation with these timestamp photos to provide to the different OTAs to say, or our third party damage protection company that we work with. And so that's why I feel is really non-negotiable for us. And even as we grow, I mean, it's a very inefficient way to run one of these businesses. I'm very aware of that. But it's just something that I feel like differentiates us. And it's really an area that I'm not going to bend on. It's quality is our sole focus, and we're going to provide that at the highest level possible. I mean, our hot tubs get deep cleaned after every single guest, no matter if they were used or not. And we don't charge for it. It's just part of our commission. And it's just another service that we offer to our property owners, which, and I personally think not charging for the hot tub and, deep cleaning them after every single turn has landed us a couple doors that we wouldn't have gotten. That's what I personally think so.
And how have you structured those teams? So let's say, do you have the cleaner be the same person who inspects, or is there a different inspector than a cleaner? So once the cleaner's done, the inspector goes, and also, I'm guessing these are third party contractors and external, like outsourced vendors at this point. So yeah, how have you approached that whole, like, incorporating that inspection component since the get-go? What's been your approach to structuring that from a team perspective?
Yeah. So the cleaners go through their checklist, and then we have someone that's employed through us, that their sole job is just inspecting the properties, and then also inventory management, which is huge. I mean, if you look at like our inventory list, there's about 40 different items that we place in a home. And so the last thing that I want to do is get a call at 9 o'clock at night because someone is missing an essential item for their stay. And so sending the inspector out there that's employed through us to basically do this 60 to 80 point checklist is, like I said, super crucial to our success. We have fantastic ratings as a host through all the different platforms. And I think that's one thing too, if you look at like performance on OTAs, and the reason why we're so selective on the homes that we manage is because, it's a rating on your whole kind of the properties that you manage. Obviously, there's a rating for each individual property, but if you're not a super host, if the property, is managed poorly, it affects, it affects the whole portfolio. And so that's really why, we send the inspector through, after every single guest checks out. And then also if it's a same day turn, which we have a lot of here in San Diego, I would say about 40 to 50% of the time, is the same day turn. We have, someone there right at checkout. And then we have that same inspector come back right before guests check in. And that's super important. And then another thing too, when we're working with our cleaning vendors, I guess, some things I would have did differently is I would have got a rock star cleaning company up front. Because what happens is, if let's say you go down the cheap route to just hit bottom line, for the owners, and they're not doing a great job, and you have to find someone that's going to do a better job, they're always going to be more expensive. And so I rather start the owners out paying a premium for cleaning than starting them off at a lower basis and then bumping up their expenses, a couple months down the road. That's one way to get an owner very frustrated. And so we work with a cleaning company that's fantastic, and we require them to be there no later than 10 minutes after guests check out. Because I've had situations where we have arrived to a property and the hot tub looks like chocolate milk. And, it takes a lot of time to drain a hot tub, to refill it, to get it reheated, or something's damaged. We got to go find a way to, um, we have to find a way to replace this item or smoke. Like if someone smoked in a house, we're very strict on no smoking, but if someone smoked in a house and we have guests coming the same day, that's a nightmare. And so it's super important that our teams are there right at checkout.
And the inspector, you say the inspector is part of your team. Is that like in terms of the compensation structure there is that a full-time employee, part-time employee? Do you pay them per inspection? How do you manage the volatility of demand, or yeah, for that role, like because I'm guessing like there's going to be months where you're going to need a lot of inspections. There're going to be some months that are going to be more quiet, so early on, does it justify having that be a person that is paid like the same thing no matter what, or do you make it be a variable compensation so that it's per inspection? Yeah, what's been your approach there as far
So
as
right,
making that work?
yeah, yeah. So right now it's hourly plus mileage reimbursement, and they work 20 hours a week for us. Once we hit 18 homes, which we're really not that far from, we will bring someone on full time to really run operations and inspections, and then probably once we hit about 26 is kind of what we're forecasting. We'll have to bring on someone else part time, and we'll just keep on building out this team underneath the director of operations to manage it because it takes a lot of time. I mean, to the time that we have to spend at these properties to make sure they're perfect, especially some of the larger homes that we manage, the 4 and 5 bedrooms. It does take a significant amount of time to get those in the condition we expect them to be in when guests arrive.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So it seems like you have a very clear uh, budget and financial model, almost kind of outlining when you can afford to bring what person. Uh, what are some of those key hires that you're thinking of already, as far as things you want to make sure you can bring on at some point? And if you can walk us through high level how you approach the math around that forecasting that you're describing, of like, okay, I think I need this many properties to be able to hire this person. Yeah, because it seems like you have a diligent approach for budgeting, which not everyone necessarily has.
Yeah, and I think, Sebastian, that really goes back to, working with a very specific property and owner. When we work with a very specific property, we can forecast and be fairly accurate because we know what those homes are going to generate. Uh, and so that's really why another reason why we do that is, for, kind of financial projections of knowing when we can hire and forecast that very accurately. And so that's the one reason. And then also, really for us is, the director of operations will be the first piece of the puzzle. And then, right around that 28 mark as well, if not sooner, we'll have someone go full time in guest communication. And so I'm actually working on that now because I want to build out templates now. I don't want to get to 20 or 25 and have to build out all the templates. I'm trying to that's part of the onboarding process now. But another thing too is I recently came in contact with someone reached out to me, and they can possibly develop a AI chatbot that can respond to 85% of guest inquiries. We just have to feed it all the data.
Hmm.
And so that's a route we may go down. And if we can achieve that, we may do that sooner. But it really just depends on, kind of the capabilities of the AI chatbot. And so I guess, to really kind of land the plane here is, once we hit 18, we will bring on that person full time, the director of operations. And then right around, 28 to 30, we'll add another kind of inspector, I guess you can call it, that'll be part time. And then we'll just continue to add. We'll most likely do part time. The reason being is because it's everyday business. So like, I don't expect someone to work every single day, and so we will have 2 part-time, along with the director of operations, and they'll lay over. So maybe someone will work, Tuesday to Friday, and then the other person will cover, Saturday to Monday. Still trying to figure that out, but we just wanna basically be in a position where every single as we continue to grow, every single checkout, we have a team member at the property.
Hmm. Hmm. That makes sense. Let me just make sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Oh yeah, there you go. There you go. I think it just got off for a second. Awesome, Wyatt. Let's see. I mean, I could keep you here for 2 more hours. Believe me, I could. Let's wrap it up with some final thoughts of wisdom. Final advice. When it comes to everything you've learned, things you wish you had known before, things you are still in the process of, yeah, just improving. So yeah, if anyone's listening to this and is inspired by your story, and is there anything, any last few words of advice or wisdom you'd like to share with anyone that's wanting to venture into this short-term rental world and build their own management company just like you did?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is, just do it. If it's something that, you're interested in, you're very passionate about. I mean, I spitballed starting a business for years now. It's always been something that I wanted to do, and I never really knew what industry I was going to do it in. I know I wanted to be in a service-based industry because I feel like that's an area that can be disrupted the most. I mean, and I'm definitely not smart enough to be creating products or technology and selling it off. Um, and so I guess, really is, you know, when you're starting a business, you're going to run into so many hurdles. Early on, when I was still working my second job, I was like, "What the heck am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? Like this is insanity." Because there's so many when you're starting off. There's so many hurdles you run into. I mean, integrating new softwares, there's always issues that come up. And so I guess just don't get discouraged and don't quit. Just keep pushing forward, and it'll all be worth it. I mean, obviously, I'm nowhere to the finish line. I'm nowhere in a position where we've made it yet, I guess you could say. But we're striving in that direction every single day. And so, I guess for people out there that even if it's not vacation rental and it's or vacation rental company, I mean, if there's something you're very passionate about and you're willing to put in the time and effort and work every single day in the beginning, I would just say go for it because it's really the most satisfying thing that I've done professionally in my life.
Wow, that's amazing. And one last thing I just want to ask: do you feel like your work ethic changed since you had a kid? Or like
A
what
little bit.
changed in terms of how you approach work? Because again,
Yeah.
you started this business right after having had a kid. First kid, first business. What's different, when you're working, with a kid versus prior to having a kid? From someone that doesn't have a kid, the question's coming. So
I think the most, I don't say obvious, but the the thing that comes to mind is I'm working on a lot less sleep. And so being able to operate still at a high level on a few hours of sleep, and my wife's a rock star too. It's just, the kid's got some lungs on him. And he likes to scream in the middle of the night. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's the first thing that comes to mind. But then also, I mean, you just get like when you're running your business, just like this podcast for you, Sebastian. I mean, I'm sure you get a rush. I mean, I know that you have another job, and so in the evenings is probably when you really put in the hours on this, and I'm sure you can relate. Like it's like you just have that second wind that comes through because it's something you're very passionate about, and if you're not passionate, it's going to be very hard, almost impossible, in my opinion. So I guess that's really what comes to mind for me is just to sleep and all that good stuff.
so you get used to working without sleep. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
Next time I'm
yeah.
tired, I'm gonna think of you and I'm gonna say I have nothing to be tired about. I have no one screaming. I have no one screaming in the middle of the night, so nothing to complain about. All right. Well, listen, Wyatt, this has been great. Thanks so much for taking the time. Thanks so much for sharing all those stories, lessons, advice. Sharing your journey. I will want you back on this show, in a year from now, just to talk about all the growth that I'm sure you will have had, between now and then. And so, super excited to continue cheering for you on the sidelines, and keep it up, man. Very very glad we managed to connect. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. You as well, Sebastian.